Hello, staff and students. This is Ms. Williams.
Hello, scholars. This is Ms. Johnson.
Hello, this is Ms. Boyd.
And this is Ms. Best.
East Gardner Mandan Middle School celebrates Black History Heritage Month. Today, we are presenting a visual timeline of Black history, leaders, legends, and legacies.
It is a chronological timeline from pre-slavery through 2021 and beyond.
The timeline is aligned with our Black History Committee theme, Missing Pages. In history, African American accomplishments and achievements are ignored, hidden, and forgotten.
And we are so excited because teams and scholars have worked together to create their presentations, and today we are going to view the finished products.
Scholars, enjoy the Black History presentation. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Hello, scholars. This is Ms. Williams, and this is pre-slavery before 1619, Africa before American slavery. The peoples of Africa had rich and diverse histories and cultures before Europeans arrived. Africans had kingdoms and city-states. Each had its own language and culture. Africans were especially skilled with medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. From 1460 through 1618, West African trade. West Africans had traded with Europeans through merchants in North Africa for centuries. Good as gold. Africa had numerous prosperous kingdoms due to Sahara trade. Ghana, Mali, Timbuktu, to the west to Cairo, Egypt, even straight across to Mediterranean and Italy. Wealthy African empires were rich in gold. Men dug the gold and the women were to wash it. Then separate the gold from the dirt. Africans call it gold dust. Gold dust was carried across the Sahara, and a lot of settlers robbed others for the gold. African kingdoms wanted salt in exchange of gold dust. Lived in extremely hot conditions, which caused people to sweat a lot. The Africans needed the salt. The Western African kingdoms and Eastern Muslim cultivations flourished for many years. They traded beads, cola beans, and even pottery. So many other resources was traded with Europeans.
Black History Month Missing Pages 1619 to 1800. The Gloucester County Conspiracy, September 1663, was a rebellion planned by indentured servants to rise up against the authorities for the first time in Gloucester County, year 1663. Crispus Attucks and the Boston Massacre. He was an escaped slave and sailor, believed to be the first casualty of the American Revolution. He was murdered during the Boston Massacre, after which he was considered a hero by all colonial patriots. Attucks was referenced by Martin Luther King when he said that the African American heritage is not only African, but American. Vermont became the first republic to ban slavery in 1777. Though it did not end all mistreatment of formerly enslaved people in the colonies, it was a step in the right direction. The male citizens gained voting rights. Phyllis Wheatley was the first African American and second woman after Anne Bradstreet to publish a book of poems. Elizabeth Freeman was the first woman to file a lawsuit and win her freedom in Massachusetts, which outlawed slavery soon after. John Chavis was a free black educator and Presbyterian minister during the early 19th century. He was a North Carolina native, a Presbyterian minister in Wake and Orange counties, studied at Princeton University and Washington and Lee University, and was the first African American known to graduate from college. Benjamin Banneker was an assistant surveyor for what would become Washington, D.C. He was also very skilled at astronomy and publishing almanacs. Cheyney University, the nation's first HBCU. Cheyney University was established on February 25, 1837. through the bequest of Richard Humphreys, February 13, 1750 to 1832, making it the first institution of higher learning for African Americans. The impact of the cotton gin. Ultimately, the cotton gin had negative impacts on slavery and contributed to the growth of slavery in the U.S., even after the international slave trade was ended. The untold stories of these enslaved peoples are the hidden pages of history. Their labor was the basis of the entire Southern economy.
Slave rebellions in the United States between 1800 and 1831. Gabriel's conspiracy in 1800. Gabriel Prosser was born near Richmond, Virginia in 1775 and died in September 1800. He was an American bondsman who planned the first major slave rebellion in U.S. history on August 30 of 1800. His abortive revolt greatly increased the white spheres of the slave population throughout the South. Before the Underground Railroad, we believed we deserved a better life. Slave revolts there's been many books written. Nat Turner's Rebellion, 1831. Driven by prophetic visions and joined by a host of followers, but with no clear goals, on August 22, 1831, Turner and about 70 armed slaves and free blacks set off to kill the white neighbors who enslaved them. In the early hours of the morning, they murdered Turner's master, wife, and children. By the end of the next day, the rebels had attacked about 15 homes and killed between 55 and 60 whites as they moved towards the religiously named county of Jerusalem, Virginia. On Sunday, October 30th, Turner was caught. A special Virginia court tried him on November 5th and sentenced him to hang 6 days later. After his execution, enraged white people took his body, skinned it, and distributed parts as souvenirs. His head was removed and 4 times sat in the biology department of Worcester College in Ohio. In fact, it is likely that pieces of his body, including his skull and a purse made from his skin, has been preserved and are hidden in storage somewhere.
Hey, this is Mr. Nelson for the Lions team, bringing you missing pages from 1830 to 1870. Robert Smalls was an incredible individual. In 1862, he stole a Confederate transport ship, sailed it out of Charleston into the Union blockade. After doing this, Abraham Lincoln was convinced to let African Americans finally serve in the Union military. Then we have the Battle of Fort Pillow, where African American soldiers fighting with the Union Army were surrounded. The fort was surrendered, but although they had surrendered, the Confederates massacred all of the about 300 African American troops. This suspended immediately all POW exchanges, which shortened the length of the war. Battle of Fort Wagner was when the 54th Massachusetts Infantry assaulted and captured the outer wall of the fort. Their incredible action bravery that day led to Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Stanton allowing the mass recruitment of African Americans, something that President Lincoln said was pivotal to the Union victory over the Confederacy. Then we have the Reconstruction Amendments. Those are the 13th, 14th, and 15th. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment set up citizenship and who qualified for it. And then the 15th Amendment set voting rights and removed restrictions on voting. And then finally, we have Hiram Rhodes Revels, who was actually born here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. In 1870, he presented the opening prayer in the state legislature. He ended up becoming the first African-American to serve in Congress. He was appointed to the U.S. Senate, so he was actually a senator, as a Republican to represent Mississippi in 1870 and 1871. He was not the only individual on this list to serve in the government. Even Robert Smalls, he too served in the House of Representatives. So those are the missing pages from 1830 to 1870.
This is Ms. Diane from the Bobcats team. Let's go ahead and get this started. Our portion timeline is from 1870 to 1900. We're going to start with George Washington Carver. This man was born into slavery, and he is known as an inventor and a scientist, the plant doctor. He was the champion of crop rotation and agricultural education. Throughout his schooling, he made strides by walking 10 miles to school every day in middle school, paying for his tuition in high school, getting a full ride, a full scholarship to college, but was declined whenever the college realized that he was African American. But whenever he tried again to enroll in college, it was successful. First black student at Simpson College in Iowa. He was the first to earn a Bachelor's of Science and Master of Science. He also worked at the Tuskegee Institute in 1896. His position was offered to him from Booker T. Washington. His main goal was to use his knowledge to help poor farmers in the rural South. He introduced crop rotation. And as you can see on the bottom, these are one of the things that he invented. He did not invent peanut butter, but he invented a version of it. Next up, we have W.E.B. Du Bois. He was born in 1868, died in 1963. Now, this man is known as an author and a sociologist, and you can read more on this slide to get more details about that kind of work. Famously known as the author of the Philadelphia Negro. He was not only a writer, a sociologist, which is the study of people, but he was also a teacher and an activist. He really wanted America to understand the way that Black citizens were viewed in America. And he was very successful at that. He got a bachelor's degree, an advanced degree at Harvard, a PhD. This man was educated. He began writing articles like the New York Globe and the Freeman. He also continued to work in the U.S. Bureau of Labor with statistics, and he just really wanted to uncover how slavery still affected the personal lives of African Americans in Farmville, Virginia. This man spread knowledge everywhere.
I'm Miss Beth speaking on behalf of the Tiger Scholars. Shout out to our scholars for this beautiful presentation. We were given 1900 to 1930. We're going to highlight those topics that you see below. Let's get started. The Harlem Renaissance, this African American cultural movement was so much more than a literary movement, but it exalted the unique culture of African Americans and redefined African American expression. African Americans were encouraged to celebrate our history, our heritage, and our culture. Jazz music. Now listen, you cannot talk jazz without talking Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong, two great pioneers in the genre of jazz. Look up their music, see what you like. Marcus Garvey. What is Black History Month and what is America without the contributions of Marcus Garvey? He organized the first important Black American nationalist movement known as UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, and African Communities League. He is associated with coining the Back to Africa movement. His ultimate dream was for the independence of all African countries and the creation of a United States of Africa. When in England, he created the African Times and Orient Review. This work was the first political journal produced by and for Black people ever published in Britain. Now, the National Pan-Hellenic Council, also known as the Divine Nine. There are 9 historically Black Greek letter organizations that make up the NPHC. While created in times of racial injustice, discrimination, unequal treatment, the primary purpose and focus of the organizations remain as camaraderie and academic excellence for its members in service to the communities they serve. Each organization in the National Pan-Hellenic Council promotes community awareness and action through educational, economic, political, and cultural service activities. 1906, 1908, 1911, 1913, 1914, 1920, 1922, and 1963. Prominent members, Alpha Phi Alpha. Hey, Mr. Daniel, shout out to you. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, W.E.B. Du Bois. Alpha Kappa Alpha, Vice President Kamala Harris, Felicia Rashad, Dr. Maya Angelou. Kappa Alpha Psi, shout out to Mr. Joyner, Cedric the Entertainer, Colin Kaepernick, Smokey Norfolk. Omega Psi Phi, Jesse Jackson, Michael Jordan, Ricky Smiley, Shaquille O'Neal, Steve Harvey. Delta Sigma Theta, the best sorority. I'm biased, and my Tiger Scholars are biased because I am training them. Shout out to myself, Miss Boyd, Miss Nesbitt, Miss McNeil, Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black woman to be elected to Congress and the first woman to run for president. Phi Beta Sigma, Representative John Lewis, George Washington Carver, Wayne Brady, Terrence Howard. Zeta Phi Beta, huge shout out to Miss Herrera, Sarah Vaughn, Dionne Warwick, Tawanda Braxton, Sigma Gamma Rho, Hattie McDaniel, Victoria Rowell, and Iota Phi Theta is outside of our timeline, but they are the last piece of the Divine Nine, so we cannot leave them out. Here are some moments of the NPHC in action. Click this link to see the open letter the presidents of the fraternities wrote to the Department of Justice for Ahmaud Arbery. The Tigers team is proud to celebrate Black history and celebrate Black heritage. Happy Black History Month from the Tigers team.
African Americans in World War II from 1930 through 1950. Missing pages, the Montford Point Marines. In early 1942, the Marine Corps established a camp in Montford Point, North Carolina, adjacent to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Spotlight. Alfred Masters became the first African American to enlist in the United States Marine Corps. Missing pages. The Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first African American military aviators in the United States Armed Forces. During World War II, Black Americans in many U.S. states were still subject to the Jim Crow laws. Missing pages. Army Nurse Corps. Della Hayden Rainey made military and nursing history when she became the first African American who was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army Nurse Corps during World War II in 1941. Missing pages. African American Navy SEALs. A less well-known but equally important name is Fred Tiz Morrison, thought to be the first African American Navy SEAL. Tiz Morrison was awarded a Bronze Star for his actions. And lastly, missing pages. First African American baseball player is Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier when he became the first Black athlete to play Major League Baseball after joining the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. Thank you for watching the Missing Pages from the Jaguars team.
Today, as the Hawks team, we will continue to talk more about the 1950s to the 1980s and integration during that time period for our visual timeline. So as we continue to talk about integration, we will talk about academic integration.
In 1965, there was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Lyndon B. Johnson pushed to approve additional funding to disadvantaged students. This additional funding acted as an incentive to truly integrate all American students in every public school. Then, in 1968, there was another act, the Bilingual Education Act. After this act, the school board in Crystal City that was 98% white was voted out and replaced by members that more closely reflected the community. So in conclusion, these events that happened during our time period had a huge impact on society and to help society what is today. There's no more segregation. Every race can go to the same school and attend the same classes without there being a problem. There are so many events that helped the academic society become what it is today. And then in 1971, the court approves busing, magnet schools, compensatory education, and other tools as appropriate remedies to overcome the role of residential segregation and perpetuation racially segregated schools. NC schools will not fully integrate until forced to do so in 1971.
John Lake was one of the first public places to integrate Black and white people at the state park. In 1960, civil rights leaders, 4 protesters at Woolworths protested a sit-in to order coffee at a white-only restaurant, now becoming a white and Black. On May of 1961, Ham Hocks Beach opens for African Americans only. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act mandates the end of racially based segregation in public places, and Ham Hocks Beach opens for all. Black people and white people come together in public. Everyone was affected and had to adapt. Due to this adaptation and integration, interracial marriages were finally allowed in 1967, but was not immediately accepted. Even today, some people don't accept Black people and white people marrying or even dating. However, in Virginia, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it is legal for Virginia interracial marriages, noting the law Loving v. Virginia. NASA shared their space with Black women as well. In 1961, 3 Black women who were mathematics named Katherine Johnson, Dorothea Van Gon, and Mary Jackson were given a spot in SHINE by outshining the men and helping the first flights to space.
Although there may be some racial disparities in our world, we are walking towards the right direction, even if it is step by step. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Muhammad Ali. Diversity and inclusion, which are the real grounds for creativity, must remain at the center of what we do. Marco Bizzarri.
Bob Marley, a reggae artist, he rocked the hardest. He was an advocate for black people so they could be treated equal. In a world that's full of trouble, could you be loved, no longer wailers and struggle. Everyone must continue to get up, stand up, don't give up the fight. Oh look, 3 little birds upon my doorstep in the morning light. Push forward, come together, change will come. Share one love, let's unite. Maybe everyone will feel alright.
Hello, my name is Peyton Glandorf, and I'm representing the Mustangs, and this is our Missing Pages of Black History Timeline, 1980 through 2000. When the foundation of our country was made, our founding fathers signed a document that said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." In the 224 years of American history, people have fought to make that statement true. Many have secured their spot in the storybook, but many have been lost. Well, they are lost no longer. Today, they are found. 1984, Jesse Jackson and black voters. Due to the events that unfolded in 1980, there was a push for a black candidate. After much debate, Jesse Jackson eventually volunteered. Many thought he wouldn't make it far, but in the end, he won 3 million votes. 1986, Oprah Winfrey launches a syndicated talk show. Oprah Winfrey was known as the first African-American woman to host a nationally syndicated talk show. And she grew to fame. And as of 2020, Oprah Winfrey was the richest African-American woman in the world. 1989, Colin Powell, 4-star Army General. Colin Luther Powell was a 4-star Army General, but he's most famous for serving as Secretary of State under George Bush from 2001 to 2005. 1992, Los Angeles Riots. On April 29, 1992, 4 Los Angeles policemen were acquitted for the beating of Rodney King. And after that, Los Angeles erupted in chaos. And in the bottom right corner, we have accounts of the riots from Mr. Frakes, our social studies teacher, who was an eyewitness. 1995, the Million Man March. The Million Man March was a political demonstration in Washington, D.C. on October 16, 1995 to promote African American unity and family values. 1997, the Million Woman March. The Million Woman March was a protest march organized on October 25, 1997, involving approximately 500,000 people. A major theme in the march was family unity and what it means to be an African American woman in America. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.
As you can see, African Americans have come a long way, but we still have a ways to go. The 2000s have brought sadness and frustration, but along with some greatness and new accomplishments. Starting with Mr. Barack Obama, the United States' first African American president. He served 2 terms from 2009 to 2017. The Black Lives Matter movement, a decentralized political and social movement protesting against incidents of police brutality and all racially motivated violence against Black people. The first time the term Black Lives Matter was used was after the death of Mr. Trayvon Martin. The broader movement and its related organizations typically advocate against police violence towards Black people, as well as for various other policy changes considered to be related to Black liberation. Remember their name. This is a list of people that have died because of police brutality or from other racially motivated crimes. This, sadly, is not the completed list. There are many more, and hopefully those will not be added to the list. One of the greats from the 2000s is the Black Panther movie. It's the highest grossing solo superhero film, the highest grossing film by a Black director. It was the first superhero film to receive a Best Picture nomination and the first Marvel comic film to win an Academy Award. This brought great accomplishment to Black Americans.
2021 and beyond. On January 20th, 2021, the United States held its presidential inauguration. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, and uniting our nation. President Amanda Gorman delivered an awe-inspiring reading that reached over the thresholds of weary American hearts. Cheers could be heard in households and workplaces in response to this young lady's poise and passion for equality. Americans erupted in applause at the conclusion of her "The Hill We Climb" across this country. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And this is from the inaugural transcript of 2021 from Joe Biden. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And so today, at this time, and in this place, let us start afresh. Rosa refusing to move her seat influenced Ruby to cross school lines, who influenced Kamala to become vice president in 2021. We find the year 2021 to be the turning of a page, a heavy, dark page in history. Americans now have the authentic opportunity to write the next chapters of history as a united country with united values, to live to life and liberty and a pursuit of happiness. God bless the United States.